Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately called IPA-USA. IPA-USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association. As part of our efforts to promote play, we've introduced Porch Play Chats, and these are conversations with people just as passionate about play as we are. You can find all the Porch Play Chats if you visit our website at IPAUSA.org. And in that top right-hand corner, be a friend on our Facebook page, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and magically every Monday, a new Porch Play Chat will appear. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm president of IPA USA. And with me on the porch is Mike Huber. Hi, Mike.
Hello.
Mike it's good to see you. I feel like, I miss you when we don't do these. Mike is the co-host of the podcast Teaching with the Body and Mind and the author of the book Embracing Rough and Tumble Play and Inclusion Includes Us, which is amazing. Mike has dedicated his life to serving children and families. He also has written children's books, including The Amazing Erik, and he has been so important in these Porch Play Chats because of his focus on including every child in the program. So Mike's title of his session today is The Expression Language Rainbow. Whew, yeah. That sounds powerful. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I first have to give credit to Carrie Burt, who's a speech language pathologist. She has her own website, Carrie Burt Seminars. I urge you to look at it, but she just did a graphic, which I realized for our low tech blurry thing on. But it's basically a rainbow to describe it.
Yeah.
But that idea of expressive language isn't just speaking, or it isn't just writing. And she uses the rainbow as the metaphor because it's that idea, I think, that, blue isn't superior to yellow or red isn't superior to green. And I really like that, thinking of that. So each color of the rainbow is a different type of expression. So she has vocalizing, and we can talk about each of these, gestures, facial expressions, talking or speech, writing, and then an AAC device. And what I find really helpful with this is when I'm working with teachers, most teachers, most adults, have a bias towards speech, right? I'll use myself as an example rather than another teacher. There was a toddler room that there's the toddler room's still here, but several months ago I would go visit, and most of the children weren't at that point of speaking, or not speaking more than a word or two, and certainly not to someone who just walks in to talk to the teacher for 2 minutes. But one kid, when I was like, "Hi, Mike," and I would turn around and say, "Hi, James." It was so exciting to see this little, 17-month-old, like, say, even though it was a 2-word phrase, it was like at the right time with the right tone, to the voice, all that. And so I responded to it. And after a few times of doing this, I realized I didn't say hello to any of the other kids because I was going in and out of the room real quick. But suddenly realized, wait, I am only listening or only responding to one child's expression. So then I would go in and when I go in to say something to the teacher, he would say, I forgot which name I used now, James, I think I said, would say, "Hi, Mike," and I say, "Hi," and then I'd look, and all the kids who are looking at me, just making eye contact, so that facial expression, I would then start saying hi to them. And then the kids who didn't make eye contact with me, I would go kind of up to them. And if they seemed like they weren't like retreating, like they're, scared of, like, who is this guy that comes in, every other day or whatever. So if they didn't seem scared, then I would also say hi to them. If they did sort of like, like show me with their gestures, like, oh, I'm a little frightened of a person I don't know well, then I might just sort of wave, but not say anything else and, step back. So I didn't have this expressive language rainbow term yet. So when I saw Carrie's post, I was like, this is what, like, I haven't had an easy way to explain it to teachers. That we use all of these things all the time, but some children use some of them more than others. And certainly at our center is an inclusion program. We have children who are, 5, 4, whatever, who don't verbalize, who aren't using words. They vocalize, but don't use words yet. And that's the type of expression. Or children who only gesture, or only, you read their facial expression. And what I found was, well, one, of course, some kids won't play with those children as much because they don't understand.
They don't know how to communicate. Yeah, right.
And there's other kids who really do, right? You always see that kid who's able to just go over and start playing. And they'll often verbalize, or put into words what the other child, like, oh, do you want to be the mommy? Oh, and they like sort of narrate for both of them. But that child is usually reading the child's expression, the other child's expression, so they know, yep, this is working. There are times, like I'm thinking of one child in particular who will sometimes then like, oh, let's go over here and kind of pull, like hold the other child's hand and kind of pull her, even the other child's kind of like pulling away.
Yeah.
And, and then that takes an adult saying, oh, it looks like she doesn't want to do that. Do you see how she's pulling away from you? And so translating those gestures for that child.
One of the things I always say is that children are always talking.
Right.
Non-verbally, those nonverbal cues are just as important as the verbal cues. But I think I agree with you. I think it's the children who engage with us that we start that reciprocal back and forth, serve and return thing.
Right.
And the children who may not engage with us verbally, it could be that we're cautious, that we don't want to interfere. It could be, but we're still not reading those nonverbal cues.
Right.
That are so important in their way of communicating, whether it's an infant or a toddler or a 5-year-old. That those nonverbal cues really help us understand what that child is trying to communicate if we know that child well enough, right? And I think that's the piece that sometimes, because we are social creatures, and so we do get drawn to those that interact with us in the way that we're used to having social interactions.
Right.
But we may not feel as comfortable recognizing those nonverbal cues.
Right. And then we're not building the relationship as well. So I'm going to I had to look it up quick, give credit also to the book Inclusion in the Early Childhood Classroom, What Makes a Difference, by Susan L. Recchia and Yunju Lee. And I think it's Teachers College Press. But the thing that really struck me with their work was they talked about the main issue that disabled children have, and I've talked about this in a past Porch Play Chat, is they become socially isolated. And partly their book focuses on then how we should be making IEP goals around that, right? And it's not just that child changing, it's helping the classroom change and the attitudes of the teachers. So after reading their book, I was really more cognizant of my own sort of bias towards the children who are speaking. And then I caught myself doing it all the time. When you're doing a large group, like we're singing songs together and say, hey, what song should we sing next? There's the children who process what I just asked real quickly and then shout out, and then can remember a bank of songs that we sing and then shout it out right away, right? In split second. There are other children that's going to take a while. And so I have to figure out ways to slow down. It's like having like a teacher created songbook where we have like a page for each song with, maybe a picture on it so they know which song. And it's like, oh, do you want to choose a song? And give it to a child and let them choose, and trying to make sure I'm allowing all children to have a choice at some point. Obviously, if you tried to have all 16 kids choose a song in one sitting, it would take forever, but just keeping that in mind. So I'm not always going to the child who, is able to,
out what they want. Yes, who can
Right.
verbalize it quickly and has that processing ability.
which is great. And I want to support that child. So that child, I don't even need to hand the books. Like if I am giving them a turn, oh yeah, Deb, we haven't heard from you in a while. So you want to do that song. Okay. But then other times say, oh yeah, remember Deb, you chose the song yesterday. We're gonna have this child choose.
We're gonna have this up.
And having the songbook allows for just that gesturing by pointing, for instance, to a song. And sometimes a child just needed the time, right? You hand them the book, they're flipping pages and they're not even looking at the song they want. They suddenly remember. It just took them 5 seconds or 10 seconds, which unfortunately, if you ever video yourself in a classroom, most of us 10 seconds, the teacher, by then we're all shouting, like deciding for them. Okay, no one has an idea. Okay, then let's do this song.
We are not good at wait time.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
And there are some children who get rewarded for, well, until they get to kindergarten when they're told to raise their hand. But there's then
there's that part too.
Yeah, and then there's that part, right? There's some children that get the immediate interaction with an adult because they've come up with something.
Right.
But if we just waited, so even if we gave them a prompt, be thinking about a song you'd like to sing.
Yes.
Because I'm going to ask in a few minutes. And, someone on this side of the room, if Johnny's over here, right? Someone on this side of the room, think of a song that you'd like to sing. And I'll come to you in just a minute. And even that, giving them some time to think. Now, they're not going to hear anything that you say after that, right? Because they're thinking about what it is they want to sing. But I think that I think we've gotten into such a rush, hurry up, because we have so much to do.
Yeah.
But we keep spinning our wheels, and because we have so much to do, we're not doing what we should be doing.
Right.
And so, yeah.
So I wanted to tell a story about a specific instance where I did this successfully. And believe me, I could be here for hours just telling you all the times I messed this up.
Right.
So I'm not saying
asset based. Let's do asset based.
Yes, anyone listening, if you've tried something and it doesn't work the first time, don't be disheartened, right? Especially because when you are reading gestures, you can get it wrong. So with that said, I went in to cover a staff member's break, the assistant teacher in the classroom, and she was over with a nonverbal child and non-speaking. That's another term I'm trying to use more, non-speaking child, because this child vocalizes. And the child had these felt pictures. I think they were like trains and like railroad track, so she's by the felt board and she could put them on like making a track and making trains, but what she was doing was holding up one of the felt pieces. And that's all I knew. If it was a verbal kid, I'd probably say, oh, I wonder what you'll do with that, whatever. And instead, what I did was I picked one up also. And I tried to pick up a train also, because she had a train in her hand, not one of the track pieces. And I think there might have been trees also. And so then she sort of smiled when I did it. And then with her other hand, she reached over and pulled the one out of my hand. And I just made a sound. I do this a lot, like whoop, or something like that, and made the face I just made, like, oh my goodness, and did a sort of whoop sound. And she laughed. And then I reached over and pulled one out of her hand and I made the same sound, whoop. And then she sort of did a similar expression to what I had done. And we started doing this over and over. She'd pick up more pieces, and then I'd pick up more pieces. I would be the only one who was able to say whoop, but
Mhm.
she would sort of, laugh, vocalize her, like laugh for sure. And then this other child came over who is the child that's really good with nonverbal kids. This
Mhm.
child has has cochlears, so she hadn't heard sound before that. For I think the first 2 years of her life. I'm trying to remember the timeline, something like a year. Actually, it's probably more like a year before she got the cochlears. So she wasn't in our program yet, but her sister was. So I still knew her. But she seems to be able to understand that non-speaking, all the other gestures a lot better than the other kids. She immediately came over, like, what are you doing? It's like, oh, we're playing a game. And so, she was sort of watching and part of the game, I didn't quite say this, but we don't, either one of us would just take one felt piece.
Mhm.
So this new girl, it's like, oh, and she just grabbed all of the felt pieces out of the other person's hand, all at once, which is very much her style. She's a very, I guess I might describe her as she is still developing impulse control,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
I wasn't sure, what, like, oh, I paused because I was gonna say, well, we're only taking one, but the non-speaking girl just did that same smile and laugh. And so it's like, oh, she really liked that. But then, the girl's still holding all the felt pieces, like, oh, she's gonna need some of them back so we can keep playing. And then she
Mhm.
like did it back and then played the same game, but she kept the girl, I should have used names for things I didn't think, would just pull one at a time, but still wouldn't give them back until she had all of them. And then
Mhm.
she'd give them back. So the game like switched a little bit, but
Mhm.
we were all reading each other's cues. And if I thought the speaking girl wasn't understanding the non-speaking girl, I would say something. Most of the time we were just vocalizing. So I was usually the one saying whoop, and then the other two would laugh, and the one girl would say, she laughed, let's call her Lisa, like Lisa laughed, and so she was verbalizing. So it was just this game that, we played for 25 minutes. I know how much time because we were still playing when that assistant teacher came back from her half-hour break, right? And it was a combination of vocalizing, me doing the whoops, gestures. All of us kind of did the gestures, both how we picked it up. It was a very like,
Mhm.
like, and if Lisa, the non-speaking girl, wanted a certain piece, she would sort of reach for it. So she was gesturing also. We could see in our facial expressions that we were enjoying it. I think there was at one point, I don't remember who did what, but at one point I saw Lisa's expression was like, oh, that
No,
addition
that's
to
too
the game
much.
is not, yeah, welcome. We're going back to, I think I might have put it on the felt board, like making it sound like whoop. And she just kind of like, what are you doing?
What are you
That's not
doing?
the
That's
game.
not the game. Well, what the other thing that I'm hearing in this story is the imitation, right? So you saw her holding a piece
Yep.
and you didn't say, why don't we put that on the felt board?
Right, right.
Instead, you went and you got a piece.
Yeah.
And that's when the engagement started. And then
Yep.
she imitated you and you imitated her.
Yep.
And it was again that reciprocal interaction where it's turn taking.
Yep.
I mean, when you think of all the things that she's able to do,
Right.
even though she may be non-speaking, she's certainly communicating her
Yes.
enjoyment,
Yep.
her engagement,
Yep.
her attention to task,
Yep.
her ability to have a reciprocal
Yeah.
interchange. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
Yeah.
You just go check, check, check,
And
check.
that next time I went into the room, she came over to me, right?
Of course,
Because
because
we
you
did
built
that.
a relationship.
Yeah. And it is interesting, as you were saying it, I was then thinking of infants, because a lot of us do easily play peekaboo with an infant,
Mhm,
which does all the things you just said.
mhm.
But there's somehow this thing, I think there is a big divide in typical development that as soon as children are somewhat verbal, we suddenly expect, like around the age of 4, adults often expect children to be able to like follow directions after say it once.
Mhm.
It's like, have you ever spoken to a group of adults? Because you can't say it once and have them follow you.
Never.
Unless you're a prison warden or, you know, whatever. But as a like public speaker,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, I think the rule of thumb I learned when I started public speaking was expect it to take 3 minutes.
Mhm.
3 minutes. And I think of in an early childhood classroom, so we should expect 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And yet sometimes, you know, there's this, but I already said it. Why aren't we doing it? Right. And so,
Why aren't you listening?
yeah.
Right?
So it's just that, yeah, yeah, right. They'll use that phrase, why aren't you listening?
Why
And we
aren't you
could get
listening?
into receptive language or hearing or whatever as a separate part of that, because hearing, of course, is processing. It's the, you know, the auditory input being received at all, then being processed,
Mhm.
and then being whatever translated into the child's current understanding of things, whatever, you know. So yeah, that's a whole other complex thing.
That's
Oh,
another porch play chat.
yeah, there is one other part of the expressive language that I want to make sure I talk about, and I will forget if I don't say it right away.
Okay. All right.
The other thing I find myself and other teachers or adults with young children doing is when one child does something and the other child grabs it back or pushes or something, and we again have that verbal bias,
Mhm.
you can tell them no.
Mhm.
And even if it's, and of course we want to get them to not push, but at the same time we want the what I didn't do enough of before I started thinking about things in this way is helping the other child read the facial expression. You know, so like when a child's giving a child a hug and the other child's like
Ooh, don't do
crunching
it.
up, you know, 2 years ago I might have said, well, you can tell her no if you don't want to get a hug.
Mhm.
But what I really need to do is, oh, look at her face. She
Mhm.
doesn't want that hug right now. And so teaching children to recognize facial expressions, recognize vocalizing, and then know that the expression isn't always going to be the same. But when you look at the combination, so some neurodivergence, such as autism or something, a child might not do the facial expression to show it, but they'll probably be vocalizing in a way that you know they don't want to, or the gestures. And maybe it is sort of pushing, not pushing hard, but kind of like, you know,
Yeah.
like,
Right.
oh, when you look at all of these parts of the expressive language rainbow, you start to notice that almost all children communicate in some way. And to then say, well, you need to tell them no. You certainly can suggest it, but first the other child should already be listening. Hey, it looks like they don't want to do that. And then if it's a child who I know can speak, I said, did you want them to do that? Or knowing that they can at least, you know, nod or shake their head no, if you know. So, and then children who, as you get older, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds might start using an AAC device where they can, you know,
Right.
point out the picture and have it verbalized for them. The 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and most 4-year-olds that I work with aren't at that point yet. And even when a child first gets that device, when they get angry,
Yeah.
just like all of us, like it's hard to then, oh, you know, let me
get my,
yeah.
So I loved how you said, look at, because I think as adults, sometimes we're not reading people's nonverbal cues,
right.
right?
Yeah.
You know, in my college classroom, I'm touchy-feely, so
Yeah.
I have to be really careful because as I'm walking through the classroom, I know when students are afraid I'm going to touch them, right? Because and it's not like, you know, I might touch their shoulder as I'm walking by.
Yeah.
And I learn quickly through nonverbal cues that that's not what they want. And so I'll say, you can tell me no.
Right.
And but I it feels like, and they'll go,
Yeah.
Okay, I won't touch you.
Right.
And so, you know, reading those social nonverbal cues and look at their face, look at their body language is,
Yeah.
I think, a skill that many adults don't have yet because we didn't practice it as children because we were waiting for people to tell us.
Yep. Yeah. That's the thing with the raising hand and then waiting till you're called on, and it doesn't. And it's not to say there aren't times when that might be helpful. You know, when I'm in a room with a lot of participants, I need someone to raise their hand to talk. But when I'm in a smaller, you know, presentation, I am like, just shout out if you're comfortable. I'm now learning that not every adult is willing to shout out. And then, you know, or you can write me a note. Or you, one thing I love, as much as I like in-person presentations, one thing I like about Zoom
It's the
presentations is
chat box.
the chat box for people who wouldn't feel comfortable raising their hand and saying it in front of everyone. And if it's a long enough presentation, you can have people write notes and bring it up, or have someone, bring, you know, but.
And the reactions too. I like
And-
the reaction buttons because as adults, because I'll say, are there any, does anybody, did you understand what I just said? And some people will go with a big frowny face and I'll say, let me try again. But
Right.
it's helpful to have those nonverbal interactions as adults, especially when you're presenting,
Right.
so that you can sort of read the room, right? In a way.
Right.
And so you boy, this
Actually, I'm going to add one to the rainbow. I think emojis.
Oh,
Now there's another, because, but I'm serious about it, that I feel like people can express themselves in ways, like you just said, you're presenting and you see the live, like, oh, good, people did hand claps during that. There's people understanding. Of course, it's that hard thing, because then you're only reading the people who
actually did something.
Doesn't understand. They probably don't. There's not a great emoji of like, what?
Right.
So, but there are times when that is another way we often express. And being a parent of an autistic child, there are times when it is helpful to just be texting from the other room rather than walk, you know, into the same room and talk. There are other times when that is the way. And if we are doing that, we're not eye to eye. We're not making eye contact. We're sitting on a couch together and, you know, occasionally glancing at each other, but mostly looking the other way to have those conversations. But sometimes just, you know, sometimes it can be a short phrase, but sometimes it just has to be the emoji. And then it's like, oh, we can do this. So I do think there is something to that, as much as people my age and older, you know, who didn't grow up with emojis.
Right.
But I also remember even when email was somewhat new and someone making a joke and me taking it literally.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, right, like there was a reason we started doing the, you know, colon and parentheses and things.
Right.
Because written alone, you can't read tone. And so I do want to add that too, that it's similar to the gesture or facial expression. Emojis serve that same purpose, that when my sense of humor, when I'm replying to something in social media, I have to make sure I put an emoji in there, because the person I'm responding to usually knows I'm joking, but anyone else, any of their other friends, or if it's a public one, like,
may think he's so mean.
Yeah,
I don't want to be that way.
So,
okay, so I have a question. Is that graph available online?
Yes, I can send you the link, because
that would be great.
Do think I haven't seen anything that's quite so succinct visually. And I actually have not talked to Carrie Bird yet. I should, I have to start getting in contact with her, because I, you know, am using her name a lot.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So, and you know, the speech language pathology world and the early childhood education world, there's some intersection, but really
not enough.
Not enough.
Right. I agree with you. Absolutely. Okay, so don't go anywhere, Michael. I close this out. To learn more about IPA USA, please visit our website at IPAUSA.org. And until next time, keep on playing.